This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Penalty shootouts, Plymouth scaring Man City, silly red, soft reds, one very hard red card, the longest VAR check of all time, and another bad day for Manchester United. All in all, a pretty entertaining FA Cup fifth round. Fulham win on pens at Old Trafford. The competition's opening up for these pat-on-the-head so-called smaller clubs. Bernd Leno, their hero, in the shootout. A great win for Brighton at St James's Park. The eternal Danny Welbeck winning it in extra time. Everyone looked exhausted. A terrible day for Eddie Howe as Isak, who was brilliant when off injured, and Anthony Gordon slapped his way out of the Carabao Cup final. More red mist at the Vitality, Matthias Cunha losing the plot shortly after scoring a belter. Bournemouth win the shootout and will sit in silence for 8 minutes to commemorate the latest VAR milestone. They needed VAR at Selhurst Park to judge whether Liam Roberts made contact with Jean-Philippe Mateta. One of those you can watch it 1,000 times and still not be completely sure. Marco Asensio is good at football, and Preston North End do something no team has done in 57 years, score against Burnley. There's some EFL, a great goal from Hibs, Jan Bednarek's dog, your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Week. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hello, I really want to skip straight to Jan Bednarek's dog.
It's one of those where I've oversold it by even mentioning it,
Okay.
I would say. Like I wouldn't skip through the rest of this, dear listener, because there's not a lot to say. But anyway, we'll get to it. Sanny Rudravajhala, hello.
Good morning, hello.
And hello, John Brewin.
Hiya, can we do Yannick Vestergaard's dog?
Well, I mean, yes, that is... I mean, you've spoiled the whole thing now, but that's totally fine. Let's start at Old Trafford. Do we have to? Look, Sanny and John, you were both there. Fulham going through on penalties. Sanny, do you think Fulham deserved to win that game?
For a big chunk of it, yes. For a lot of normal time where there was a point where they were getting really comfortable in possession, just knocking it round. Casemiro came on in the second half, and although at some point he realised that if he just gets the ball out his feet and plays the ball early, that worked quite well. Otherwise, he was kind of just in between the lines, not really doing anything. But then United did come back to it. Took a very long time for the United fans to get going. I guess they've not had too much to sing about. Chido Obi coming on kind of made a big difference, and in extra time, I think it swung the other way. But for the longest time, I did think Fulham were the better side here.
What did you make of it, John?
United are not very good, and Fulham have... Fulham have a plan. Yeah, Fulham stuck to the plan. Manchester United have a plan. It's the same plan that they try every week. It doesn't work, but he still tries it every week, and he moves players in and out. And you mentioned Casemiro, who possibly did improve in his play. He throws in Obi, and Obi hurried a couple of chances that I think a more experienced striker would have gobbled up. But you can't blame him. You can't blame him for what had gone before. You can't blame him for the fact that
he hasn't mastered the Jedi ways. Come on, let's get it out of the way.
No.
Yeah, he's young.
Yeah, he's 17 years old. He's 17 years old. He's from Denmark, a Nigerian extract. This guy has just arrived in Manchester, basically. Arrived as a footballer anyway. It was my first trip to Old Trafford for a long time, and it just things haven't changed too much, but the team is worse. That's the thing I would say. And just things like De Ligt. Can this guy stay on his feet? Every time you see him, this guy is falling over or throwing himself. And everyone is sort of off balance in the Manchester United team. That's what it feels like. It's just everyone is sort of leaning the wrong way when they should be. And no one's got any comfort on it. And Bruno scored a very good goal, belying the Roy Keane criticism. Fulham had a lot of it their own way. I mean, we got to see a lot of Adama Traore doing his special step over move. And that's a big step over, because this guy, wow, he gets bigger every time I see him. United struggled with him. United struggled with Fulham's command of midfield. You'd probably say if Fulham had a better attack, they'd have won the game quite easily. Manchester United are not very good, and I'm sure we'll discuss what the meaning of all this is, but the meaning of all this is that they have the Real Sociedad game to save them, and otherwise it's a total blank of a season, and the misery continues.
We'll get to the misery, but it is worth saying, Baz, with the Man City caveat, and we might say it a few times in this pod, it's such an opportunity for teams like Fulham to win a trophy. This will be Fulham's first major trophy, right? And they are what? They've got Palace. Palace will be feeling the same, right? In the next round, and then a semi, and then you never know.
Yeah, well, you've 8 teams now, 9, Forest or Ipswich, who don't get to Wembley very often now, just one game away from Wembley. Preston getting to this quarter-final. Preston never really... They're just there, aren't they? They don't tend to get promoted. They don't tend to get relegated. They just don't really do much of interest. So they'll be very happy with a home draw against Villa. They'll fancy their chances. And I think there's no reason why Bournemouth shouldn't beat City at home. I think Bournemouth are... They have already beaten City this season, and they're a really, really good side. So I'd give them every chance of beating City. I actually thought this was one of Man United's better performances. It's a low bar.
That is really saying something.
Admittedly. This game was fairly low on quality. Andre Onana, who's been getting a lot of stick recently, much of it deserved, made some pretty decent saves, but he never really looked like saving anything in the shootout. And I think Fulham were probably worthy winners overall. They didn't have to be at their best to win this game either, or to prevail in the tie.
I mentioned for Calvin Bassey, I love seeing, I know we mentioned it recently when he scored the other day, someone who is so happy when they score a goal. Like, it's meant to generate happiness, and there is a guy that when he scores, and it doesn't happen often, he's totally delighted. Reece says, does being the only competent employee in a useless workforce make Bruno Fernandes the Premier League's most relatable player? I mean, it is true, John, isn't it? Without him, and you wonder what he is thinking. Like, because he is, like, he never stops.
I was going to say, he makes it quite clear what he thinks quite a lot of the time.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, he's angry about everything, but even
he doesn't have a great poker face, does he? I would like to play cards with Bruno Fernandes.
This heap of shit again. Damn, cards on the table.
Oh, here we go again, pulling you out of the mire.
I suppose the question is not that then. What is he thinking? It is, could you envisage him saying, "I can't be bothered"?
Well, he'd be entitled to, wouldn't he? To just say, okay, well, not entitled. Entitled to say, right, I want out of this club. I want to go somewhere where I could win trophies. It's interesting, isn't it? You are the idol of a falling star, a collapsing empire, etc., etc. The thing is, so fractious as the support become online, not necessarily in the stadium. I think in the stadium, fans still get behind the team. I was quite impressed by that, considering how things are on and off the field. The support continues to impress me that goes to the matches. But he's playing for this team, and you just think, yeah, he must look around and think, why is no one else doing this? And I think the Roy Keane criticism was way off beam, actually. Remind listeners what that was. Well, Roy Keane on the overlap towards the end of the show, which had all been very good-humoured, suddenly on the subject of Bruno, there's a phrase of calling him, I don't think he called him directly an imposter, but there was this idea that, no fight, which I think is way off beam when it comes to Bruno, because there is fight in this guy. He shows it almost every week in pulling Man United out of the mire, however briefly that may be for. Keane's thing is about, one thing is like, he doesn't close them down. He's closing them down. He's been a bluffer. Like he is, like, so his attitude to pressing may not be what everyone else is. But if you're Bruno Fernandes, maybe you don't have to do all the pressing. Maybe there's other players in the team that's supposed to do that. If you're the luxury star player, that's not how it used to be. And Keane often sees things through his own prism, doesn't he? What was Roy Keane good at? Closing down players, yeah? Showing a lot of fight. Bruno has gifts that Roy Keane did not have as a player. Now, there is a revisionist thing of Manchester United fans that say, oh, Roy Keane was a brilliant passer and all that type of thing. And then he was a good passer of the ball. But I remember what Roy Keane, I used to go and watch Manchester United every week. And a lot of the time, teams would play against Roy Keane and would let him have the ball all the time because he wasn't as good a passer as the other players on the team.
As everyone else.
Yeah.
That's interesting,
And listen, I'm not doing down Roy Keane. He was a fantastic player before your All-Star. He was a brilliant player. Drive 'em, Roy, was what the guy in front of me at United used to say. Drive 'em, Roy. Drive 'em. Because that was his job. Now, Bruno isn't that type of player, and that's why the criticism comes in. But I don't think you can criticise Bruno Fernandes for his output for Manchester United.
Not at all. I mean, I wonder, Sanny, if you look at that, the midfield is so interesting, isn't it? It seems like whoever they play, the other team have a better midfield. And I did think that, that was the same again. Sanderberger, Lukic, Pereira as well, just had control of that area.
Spot on, yeah. Especially Sanderberger, physically great, and
great game, didn't it?
Ugarte got hooked quite early in the second half. The Bruno thing is weird, but everyone around Bruno, isn't good at all. The goal again was yet another set piece. Like neither Yoro or Mazraoui deciding to pick up Calvin Bassey at all. Who's, by the way, has got a great chant from the Fulham fans to the tune of Lady Gaga's Paparazzi, Calvin Bassey, which is great.
Oh, yes.
Love that.
Yeah, no, that could work.
Oh, and what was the other one? A Lukic in the middle of our pitch for Sasa Lukic. I like that one too. Very clever. Very good. And again, he had a good game as well. I mean, it is very weird what's happening at United with those players. But then look in front. So early on, quite often, through balls were going to Joshua Zirkzee. He could have tried to go for them, but it's not his game, and he just lets them run. And you're like, how is he getting this long into his time at United where people are still trying to play a channel ball to him when he's not that guy? He's a hold-up, flick-on man. And Rasmus Højlund got subbed again early on and doesn't offer anything at all. So criticism of the midfield, but in front of them, he's almost non-existent. I mean, the fact, a 17-year-old kid, 6'2" kid, so to add, in Chido Obi can come on.
Big lad.
Yeah, very big. Can come on and offer more than Rasmus Højlund's done, who himself's only 22. Kind of really puts an emphasis on where they are at. They're completely impotent going forward, incompetent at the back, and missing in the midfield. There you go. It's a mess.
Zirkzee, I thought when he shifted position, actually looked quite good. God, this is terrible to say, but if Zirkzee played in the Championship, he'd get about 40 goals a season or something. He'd be such a luxury player. I mean, he's actually really. I mean, it's actually a really, really skillful player.
He's a slow motion Adel Tarabt, perhaps.
Yeah. It's decent touch for a big man. It's all there, but but not at Manchester United. Maybe.
Well, it's possible he could go to another club and flourish. It has happened before.
It's been known. It's been known.
Been known. And well done to Bert Leno, for saving those penalties. The narrative would be different if the shootout had been different. Let's go to St James's Park. Newcastle won, Brighton 2. And we could have led with this, Barry, because this is a very entertaining game. Batch says, is Danny Welbeck the greatest man to have ever lived? It's a brilliant win for Brighton. A terrible day for Newcastle, but another brilliant goal for Danny Welbeck.
Yeah, I think I would have broken my spine if I attempted to do what he did when he adjusted position to put that ball over Dubravka. He's 34. He's having, I can't remember far long enough back to know how this rates among his other best seasons, but he's been brilliant for Brighton. There's talk of an England call-up. I don't know if he'll get one or not. He's 34. He might have a better chance of getting one from Thomas Tuchel than some young up-and-comers, because Tuchel's only there for the short term, one suspects, as England manager. Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant for Brighton this season. I remember when we were all talking about Evan Ferguson as a potential star for the future. He may well be a star for the future, but Welbeck is firmly ahead of him in the pecking order at Brighton. And, as you say, a really bad day for Newcastle, who have this habit now, and it is a habit, of conceding goals in the last 25, 30 minutes of games and not being able to respond. I think they look tired. And, of course, now Anthony Gordon got himself sent off stupidly. There is talk that Newcastle may appeal that decision. I don't know if it's even worth bothering with, because I can't see it being overturned. And he's now ruled himself out of the Carabao Cup final so unnecessarily and so stupidly. And that, Newcastle are already outsiders to win that, and they're going to be even more outsiders now that he won't be playing.
Yeah, just to confirm, because I did check just then, Evan Ferguson's on loan at West Ham, isn't he? I was wondering how far down the pecking order at Brighton do you have to be if you're playing for West Ham? Quite far down, it turns out. Yeah, I mean, that moment for Newcastle fans, for Anthony Gordon to basically lose, sort of knock yourself out of 2 cup competitions, just so putting the whistle's got. I mean, there's no, I'm trying to think when a straight red is kind of, fair enough. There probably isn't one, but like that is just so silly.
I watched it in the press room at Old Trafford, and we were talking about how Jimmy Greaves used to have a column in a newspaper called Wally of the Week. Now, there's no doubt that that's where Anthony Gordon would be headed, where Greaves is still around. A complete head loss, you could see in Eddie Howe's face that just everything just dropping away. Like, oh, God. Do you remember we used to have this thing called the frivolous appeal, where if you challenged a ban and you did it to just for the sake of it, you would get an extra game. Maybe,
does that not happen anymore?
It doesn't happen anymore. No, maybe Newcastle.
Okay.
If Newcastle challenged that, maybe. I mean, they probably deserve it. I mean, because it was a stupid thing to do. You can't do that. I think it's a terrible shame for Anthony Gordon, who I think has shown in moving to Newcastle what a good player he is. Has worked really hard. He did a very good interview, I think, with Jamie Carragher, in which he talked about how hard he'd worked on his game and shown that he isn't just, another footballer. There's something a bit different about him and about the way he approaches the game. But unfortunately, he behaved like another footballer in doing that. It was a stupid thing to do. Newcastle, look forward to these cup finals. They're all peeled down to Newcastle. I mean, there was this big story the other week that this time they won't be able to go into Trafalgar Square because something's on that day. Whereas normally, because normally they just fill Trafalgar Square. That there are other places to go in London other than Trafalgar Square, lads. But it's and they get so excited about cup finals, because they don't go to many. And there's that footage, isn't there, of 1970. I think it's 1976 when they lose to Manchester City in the League Cup final. They come back to an open-top bus parade because, well done, lads, getting to the final.
Yeah.
And that spirit still is there within Newcastle. I'm not patronising Newcastle. I think that's, that's what the cup is for teams to want to win in either cup. And Anthony Gordon has probably made sure that might not happen. It would be one hell of a shock if they won the Carabao Cup without Anthony Gordon.
Yeah.
Silly boy.
Yeah, and like Sanny also, like Isak came off. I don't know if it's precaution or injury. Obviously, Barry last pod was saying he might be ruled out of the final before he started and played brilliantly in this game. So as Mal says, I don't know how reliable Barry's source is, but if he is missing as well for that Carabao Cup final, it's such a shame for that game, isn't it? Because you want it to be competitive. You never know, they could do something. I thought, and Isak was so unlucky in this game. I thought.
Yeah, he could have scored one very early on as well, couldn't he? And without him, I don't think he got a chance, really. He's, 19 goals, 24 in the Premier League this season. Like, everything's coming through him. Just the way he's able to not only bring other players in, but also as well, like, his finishing confidence, the first time, just doing it quickly, has really punished teams this season.
Yeah.
So, without him, I don't think Newcastle have a chance at all. So they got to somehow protect him. And hope the league form doesn't suffer if they have to wrap him up in cotton wool. If any of Barry's sources say he might have another injury upcoming, who knows? Are you clairvoyant with them?
Eddie Howe didn't seem particularly perturbed after the game, and I think took him off as a precautionary. Looks like Lewis Hall may well miss the Carabao Cup final.
He's really good.
Botman is touch and go, so that's not great news.
Yeah,
there was a point in the second half when I just looked at Newcastle. They looked absolutely knackered. And I did wonder, I mean, obviously they've been in a lot of cup competitions, but that's not a good sign at this point in the season. That there was just, the game is there to be won, and there was no one was there to chase. And I thought, there are questions, aren't there, over how Eddie Howe prepares the team, how he, the red zones and all that type of thing that various managers have talked about, how aware of those he is. Slightly concerning for Newcastle because they've got a top 5 place he could play for. If Isak comes back in, it's doable. It's there to be taken.
They've got a really thin squad, haven't they? A really thin squad. And as soon as you take any of those, I mean, like Will Asula was on the bench and he was pretty anonymous for Sheffield United last season, let alone for Newcastle. So
right.
Very quickly, you lose the quality.
Yeah, Fabian Schär, I mean, that also changes, doesn't it? If he was so just tiny bit offside, bit of semi-automated offside for us in injury time. I felt for Anthony Taylor. Yeah, I had producer Joel saying this, on his mic, because it sort of sounded like he was going in and out of signal on a tunnel. He was on a train. Or as my new colleague, David O'Doherty, would say, you just sit on a train staring at your phone going 5G, 4G, 3G, emergency calls only, 3G, 4G, 5G, up and down again. You just couldn't hear everything he was saying. Barry, what do we think about Minty refusing to celebrate against his former club? I honestly presumed he'd been there since the age of 7. Such was the level of his apology. No appearances. His entire season at Newcastle was out on loan at Feyenoord, I think.
I don't really care whether he celebrates or not. It does seem odd. It was a good goal. I liked the way he opened his body and then pulled the ball inside the near post.
I think he got lucky. I think
it does take a little deflection off Trippier. That's correct. But look, I don't know what his relationship is with various people behind the scenes at Newcastle or whatever. But the whole, I'd be going full Calvin Bassey if I'm honest. But
he just bloody loves that. He bloody loves their loan supervisor at Newcastle.
Yeah. So
the guy that used to call him once a week and say how's things going, like they really got on very well. So no need to disrespect him.
Ryan says this, John, should red cards carry over to other competitions? I think it's not an illegitimate point. I says if you get sent off in a losing game in the 5th round of the FA Cup, if you're then out for the next season's 3rd, 4th, 5th round, that seems a long way away.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I don't know how I feel about, you get sent off here and you can't play in that competition.
Yeah, but I mean, we're going to talk about an incident at Millwall, and it would look very weird if that goalkeeper got sent off, and then was able to play next week for Millwall. I mean,
yeah, and actually, I suppose Millwall might lose the next FA Cup 3rd round, and then he's suspended for another 2 games in like 2020. Yeah,
I mean that did used to be the case, I think, but they rationalised it and made it more sensible. But yeah, it's true, isn't it? You get to this point in the season when cup finals and vital league matches start appearing, and then suspensions, and that's when the disciplinary tightrope, I believe it's called in football cliches language.
Well, more of that because every game had a red card as far as I can tell. But we'll start part 2 at the Vitality. Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Bournemouth are through. They beat Wolves 5-4 on penalties. Evan Nielsen scoring on his comeback for Bournemouth. Cunha scoring an absolute unbelievable goal and then getting sent off. And remember where we were, Barry. A whole 8 minutes of a VAR check. Both sets of fans chanting words to the effect of "This isn't football," and that's a long time to wait. They couldn't use semi-automated offside because of congestion in the penalty area, by all accounts.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, particularly in a weekend where it was flagged up that semi-automated offside would be employed to make sure these decisions were made quickly, but then it turned out semi-automated offside doesn't function so well in a congested penalty area, and 7 minutes it's too long. The fans, both sets of fans were angry. You could see the ref was cringing and felt compelled to go over to explain to both benches what was going on. And it's not good enough, really. The goal was eventually ruled out. After the game, Anthony Iraola said that only one team tried to win the game, and I think he's probably right. Bournemouth were vastly superior. They had 2 goals ruled out. Had the lion's share of the chances. Sam Johnson had to make a lot of saves for Wolves. And I think Bournemouth deserved to go through, ultimately. And Matthias Cunha, another clown show.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't the red mist. It was like a sort of, it was like a thick curtain of red fog, wasn't it? Socrates says, if Michael Douglas' character from the movie Falling Down was a footballer, would it be Matthias Cunha? After spectacles and mullets, what's next? Did he pull the hair of the... What did he... I thought it was just a sort of few punches there, Sanny. I'm not sure, but...
Yeah, fair play to whoever... I can't remember who was getting headbutted at that point, but they didn't go down or anything. They just pointed to the head, like they'd been... Ref, did you see that? Which is quite kind of schoolboy stuff. Cunha... I mean, look, the easy one is to say it's part of his game, isn't it? But it's not part of his game. It really isn't part of his game. Unless the part of the game is... like that Wayne Rooney volley against Newcastle where he was angry at the ref and a second later he smashes it in. But he's not playing angry, is he? He's a genius. And then you just give him a little tap or a push or a shove and he goes absolutely mad. I mean, again, that one ended with him in a melee off the pitch, refusing to go down the tunnel like we've been here before. And it puts Wolves in a real difficult situation now because he's going to be gone for, I don't know how long now. It's one of those, if he was like a Sunday League player, he'd have a letter from the county FA, wouldn't he? With a really long ban. Mm-hmm. But I don't know whether the...
Well, it's minimum 4 games and possibly more. And it's a great result for Ipswich, however they get on tonight against Nottingham Forest.
I think 4 games takes it to Ipswich in terms of his suspension.
Yeah.
Wolves are famously welcoming of disciplinary decisions, aren't they, after... if you ever attend Molineux, in fact, the week before I went to, funny enough, Bournemouth Wolves, and when a Bournemouth player, Zaboni, was being sent off, the Wolves fans were still singing "Fuck VAR," despite the fact that VAR had weighed in their favour. So yeah, it's not going to go down well. But really, they have only one person to blame.
Yeah, and his goal is, it's one of those goals which is look around and think, none of you lot are going to do anything, so I'll just score.
He could be their Letitia, couldn't he? Like he is, if you're talking teams towards the bottom having one genius that is going to haul his team out, he's the Letitia of this season's relegation battle, such as it is. He's so far ahead of the players that those other teams have got. Except he can't play because he's a Wally.
I suppose there is a question about his future, and if you are one of the top clubs, because he could play for any of the teams, I think. But would you take a second and go, that is you just, maybe it's different if you're playing for a bigger club, not because of conspiracies, because you're just less often you're winning more often. You're sort of it's less likely to be like angry about the world. I don't know. You're
taking a Howard Wilkinson Cantona style gamble, aren't you? Where it's like you've watched this guy get sent off in France and think, all right, I'll take him and see how we go. And then, if that happens, then no one in the Premier League doubts his class. I mean, as I said the week before, Bournemouth couldn't take the ball off him. He was like a defensive shield because he was so good. And that's Bournemouth, who are the masters at taking the ball off. He's a brilliant player. That goal was absolutely amazing,
wasn't it?
And he does it all the time. and then he does that.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, Sanny, and sort of Baz alluded to it. We're all looking as neutrals for just someone else to win the FA Cup, and actually, Bournemouth away is the hardest possible draw. Perhaps Villa, but Bournemouth have something over City. City will probably still be favourites. They'll probably still win, but in terms of trying to get them knocked out, this is a really good draw for all the teams left in.
Yeah, it is. Bournemouth are something else. I mean, 31 efforts they had on goal against Wolves. I mean, it was just all them, wasn't it? And yeah, I think anyone facing them is going to have real issues. I mean, that's the short version, isn't it? I mean, what was it? Was it Barney said the best team in the world is Bournemouth? Yeah. I mean, it's a good thought experiment how far they would go in the Champions League. I guess they've got the opportunity to see what they can do in the FA Cup to prove him right, actually. What a prescient comment that would be. By the way, before we finish on this, just to quick shout out to the erstwhile presenter of Guardian Football Weekly, Robin Cowan, who in the Match of the Day commentary on the VAR said, "We've all got homes to go to," which I thought was a good line on that delay. And I know as well she put on her Instagram that she was looked after very well with her new baby whilst commentating. Not with baby alongside, but looked after there. So she's doing well, and I hope she did get home okay.
So she only presents Football Weekly with baby on her knee. He wasn't in the commentary box, was it? No?
He was there.
He was down there. He was there. So, that is a very positive thing, actually, isn't it? That, football clubs, you can think, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, however many years ago, the thought of a female commentator or anyone working at clubs saying, "Can I bring my baby and will that be okay?" And people in the game would have said, yeah, would have laughed at you. So, that is progress, everybody.
Was he in that little glass box all the injured Bournemouth players were in a few weeks ago?
It doubles up as a crash. Yeah, the Bournemouth players had to look after him. Let's go to Selhurst Park. Then Palace 3, Millwall 1. Chris says, was Michael Oliver waiting on intervention of VAR or the CPS? Millwall keeper Liam Roberts sent off after 8 minutes for a totally reckless foul on Jean-Philippe Mateta. His foot is so high. It could have been incredibly serious. Mateta was treated on the pitch, given oxygen. He had 25 stitches behind his ear. He said on social media, "I'm doing well. I hope to be back very soon and stronger than ever. Well done, guys, for a great job today." Set to have an operation on that. And I suppose, John, that this is a great example that intent doesn't matter. I don't think anyone thinks Liam Roberts meant to do it. I think it's not Schumacher on Battiston, but it is a terrible, terrible challenge.
There's no doubt about that. The only thing I would say about the intent is it's Crystal Palace, Millwall. Everyone's fired up. I'm not saying that he set out to do him, but there's an extra bit of needle there, isn't there? The atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he got carried away. We've seen this before where goalkeepers which get the chance, just come out and overdo it.
And often actually do get away with it. Like if he just plays the ball there and doesn't really get Mateta, it's probably not a foul, even though his foot is that high.
It was not the best thing to do in that
No,
moment.
definitely
anyway.
not.
Like it's like he wouldn't be coached to do that, would he? It completely overshadowed the game. I mean, you had this halftime interview with Steve Parish, Kelly Summers did on the BBC. But Steve Parish, before Kelly Summers is trying to say, "Well, what about the preach at Palace? Things are going well. What about that challenge?" And it was like this sort of monologue about the challenge, and I've never seen anything worse than that, and all that. And you thought, well, yeah, because anyone, it'll be in 10 years' time. It was like, memory lane. Here's the foul done by the Millwall guy, because it is.
Yeah.
It will live in football lore like the Tony Schumacher one. The game itself didn't really matter once that incident had happened, because we're all worried about what happened to Mateta. Thankfully, he's going to be okay, we think. And then we think about what's going to happen to the goalkeeper. You've got Alex Neil somehow having to, put some element of a positive light on it. I'm not sure he was particularly successful in that. Oh dear. And, you've got Millwall and this club with this reputation that they revel in, and then that happens and you think, oh dear.
Jimbo says, why have I seen more condemnation of Michael Oliver's failure to immediately send off Roberts than of Roberts himself, who committed the foul? I get that Oliver should have seen it, but it seems people hold refs to higher standards than players who commit fouls. Why is this? What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't think Liam Roberts meant to hurt Mateta. I think he ran out of his box and he panicked and he went for the ball. He shouldn't have. It was an undeniable act of violence, very reckless, very stupid. I would like to think Liam Roberts was very concerned about Mateta's welfare once he sort of retired to the dressing room and inquired after it. Yeah, it was bad. He could have done him serious harm. And I think he has been criticised, and he deserves criticism. Michael Oliver has also been criticised, and he deserves criticism, I suppose, because I'm not a fan. Some people think refs should have to come out and explain contentious decisions after games, and I think that would be a terrible idea. But I'm genuinely curious to know why Michael Oliver didn't immediately produce a red card and had to go to the monitor to decide to send off Roberts, because he had a very good view of it. And is it a case that he was just, I'm going to send him off, but I'll just check just in case, to make sure what I think I saw happened. Part of me thinks Michael Oliver, he's not been great recently, and I think maybe he's just at a stage where he's second guessing every single big decision he has to make.
Well, Barry, I know you're not a big fan of Alex Neil, but what I did think at post-match, he didn't show any humanity at all when he was asked about the challenge. He was so bullish and defending Roberts. It really came across the exact opposite way. Like, there's a player so hurt he's had to go to hospital. Someone who's lit up the Premier League. And he's like, oh, it's not the worst challenge ever. Like, you can defend your goalie without diminishing how bad something is and how poorly someone's been hurt. And I think Alex Neil really didn't do himself any favours then.
Well, Alex Neil is a weird one insofar as he's not a particularly good or sought-after manager. He's at Millwall. He is not the first Millwall manager, and he won't be the last to refuse to comment on the bad behaviour of the more knuckle-headed elements of Millwall's support. And yeah, so I wouldn't expect much better from him, to be honest.
The let him die chants from the Millwall fans when Mateta is clearly stricken does Millwall no favours. The good thing about the Michael Oliver thing is Barney, in our points from the weekend thing that we run on a Monday in The Guardian, suggests that Michael Oliver deliberately leaned on VAR knowing that it would make the decision for him, and chooses, I think it's fairly on his side, saying that Oliver will have been aware what it was, and you may as well use the tech to show what had happened. That's one way of looking at it, and I wouldn't disagree. Barney was there and would have been aware of the way things went as it happened, I suppose. The thing is, Michael Oliver, though, I saw Barry involved in a discussion of Michael Oliver on social media last night, and I sort of get drawn into that. But the thing is, the minute Michael Oliver makes a decision, everyone brings it back to the decision Michael Oliver made against their team, and it all kicks off into this refereeing conspiracy that we have now that is, well, it's too much, really.
Let's go to Villa Park. Casting mind back to Friday night. Villa 2, Cardiff 0. Who knew, Sanny, that elite footballer and 3 times Champions League winner would make such an impact at Villa? I mean, there was one moment where Asensio dragged the ball out of the sky. I think it was in the first half.
Oh.
It wasn't his goals. We were just like, this is why I love this game.
It is brilliant. And I know you've reflected before with Dan Bardell. Like, who'd have thought we'd see him and Marcus Rashford there at the start of the season? He's just so good. What has been great is how quickly he's hit the ground running. And also, I don't know whether it's coincidence that him and Rashford in particular seem to be linking up so well. But given all the noise we've had around Marcus Rashford too, he's also coming to the fore. But yeah, Asensio, just so good. I know there were a couple... I got a little bit of stick online for a very hot take column where I basically slagged off the FA Cup and said every team's going to play reserve sides. And Villa fans got back to me, well, not quite a reserve team. And yeah, Asensio, who's not been starting, certainly isn't one of their reserve players. And Cardiff had a couple of kids. I think they threw a 19-year-old on, a 20-year-old as well. But both played strongish teams. And yeah, Asensio just kind of lit it up. It was great. He's absolutely quality. And I guess in the same way that leaving Man United, you can go and have a great career, leaving PSG doesn't mean you're done either. And he's done that very well. So fantastic. And just a joy to watch. Looking forward to more of him.
It's worth pointing out in this game, Ethan Horvath was in goal for Cardiff and was sensationally good. He came in for Jack Ornick. I don't know if it was rotation or Ornick was injured, but what a performance. It was incredible.
Let's go to the Etihad. Man City 3, Plymouth 1. And look, Plymouth had their moment, didn't they? Look, they've already beaten Brentford and Liverpool. They've had a great run. They went 1-0 up in this round. And actually, John, the goal scorer, Maxim Talovierov, it would have been, such a moment for him anyway. He's born in Ukraine. His parents still live in Kyiv. especially given what has happened in, the big boy world of politics, on Friday, the implications of what that might have on his homeland.
There weren't too many big boys in the White House on Friday.
No, it's a very good point. But even still, like, that moment for him is something.
I'd like to see him put on in a 50-50 challenge with JD Vance. Thinking, do you think he'd go for the ball? I mean, but anyway, okay. If Plymouth weren't going to win this match, which it was, beyond the realms of possibility, they do have that moment. Now, it actually led to quite an interesting discussion. I saw it the weekend, which was a Plymouth fan saying, if you follow a top six club, you will never have a moment like that. Now, I thought that was an interesting point because I followed a former top six club, now the worst football team in the world. But I had a lot of moments like that. It's not...
Yeah, Aguero is still that moment, right?
Aguero is moment. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in the Nou Camp is still that moment. Now, I have seen Macclesfield Town score at Chelsea. They think they lost 8-1 in the end, but they equalised. And it was that was a moment, and that moment is a special moment. It's just a different moment. That's all. But it's still special, and it's still something that the FA Cup gives. And it was wonderful to see. And you begin to think, is the Manchester City wobble going to extend this far? It didn't. Pep is attempting to rebuild that team so quickly, isn't he? If he manages to pull this off, well, he is the greatest manager of all time, which he probably is anyway. Well done, Plymouth. They have been a credit to the FA Cup. And that man, Kasic, is going to be on all the montages and all that. Those celebrations of the defensive, tackles and stuff. He's been brilliant to watch. They've been excellent. They've been excellent.
To Deepdale, Preston 3, Burnley 0. Look, it's great news for Preston. As you alluded to this, Barry, at the start of this pod, and you did on the radio yesterday about Preston North End. Actually, Hamid got in touch at Preston Forever, who says Barry's experience of Preston in his 40 years of watching football is perfectly summed up on your radio programme. We've spent the last 10 years in the Championship, never finished higher than 7th or lower than 14th. A quarter-final home draw against Villa is something to get excited about. And it is for them to, like Villa, the chance of them winning the FA Cup is slim, but like these are, as John was saying, this is their moment. This is great for them.
Yeah, Robbie Brady, who I think I knew he was a Preston, but I've forgotten. But he certainly provided a reminder with one of the goals of the round, a wonderful free kick. And that opened the scoring against a Burnley side who don't let in goals. So,
no,
that's how to get one past the Burnley keeper. Preston Burnley, I know John wrote an article about this last week, their history. They met at the very first day of the first ever Football League.
Yeah.
They've played 143 times in the league, but this was the first time, remarkably, they'd ever met in the Cup, which seems astonishing. Preston will fancy their chances against Villa. Villa are not particularly good away from home. I'll be honest, I never watched Preston, so I don't. They just seem a bang average Championship side, but they'll fancy their chances.
I mean, the big story, which is sort of not the magic of the FA Cup in this game, is the second goal scorer for Preston, Militin Osmaic. You may remember getting an 8-game ban last year for biting, I think, a Blackburn player. He was accused of racially abusing the Burnley midfielder Hannibal Mejbri when the teams met here a fortnight ago. The Burnley players refused to shake his hand. When he scored, he cupped his ears to the away fans. Scott Parker didn't pick Hannibal for this game. He was fit to play, could have been selected. He wasn't picked. And Scott Parker said, I kept asking myself whether it was the right thing to do, but the decision was fundamentally about protecting a young boy. I mean, there were chants from the home crowd asking whether Hannibal was watching. Some good old football tribalism for you. Obviously, it is incredibly complicated, this, Sanny, in terms of, any case where it's one person's word against another, that investigation is still going on. But something doesn't feel right that Hannibal is the guy that doesn't get to play this football match.
No, and that's a reflection of where we are, well, as a society, but certainly in football terms, isn't it? That the victim, for want of a better term, is the one then who misses out on this opportunity. Albeit, given Scott Parker made 9 changes, he may not have featured anyway. So it was something convenient there.
You can't not pick Osmaic, right? He's innocent.
Yeah,
till
exactly.
proven guilty. Like it feels it's complicated. I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, looking back at the video, like, you know, as a lot of us done an infinite number of times, you know, it's hard to tell. An element of his game is this kind of anger that boils up in him, with the biting of a Blackburn Rovers player, clearly. And the cupping of both ears subsequent to the refuse to be shook hands with start. Just this extra element is very much kind of in the same wheelhouse as the John Terry, Wayne Bridge sort of, you know, that something completely outside of the game has taken over and dominated the game, and it's actually still ongoing, and we'll never get the full extent of it all, and it wrecks everything else. Because, you know, we're not going to mention Stefan Tordarson of Preston, who had a brilliant game in the middle of the park and set up the diag for the third goal, because we're busy talking about this, aren't we? And I guess with all these things, we need resolution. We need resolution quickly. I don't know why that hasn't been done. I know this event was very recent, but why can't you expedite this so this situation doesn't necessarily have to arise, because it's dealt with? Now it's rolling on. Now we have more fuel added to the fire. So, yeah, can we get ourselves sorted on that front, please?
Well said. That'll do for part 2. Part 3, we'll do some EFL and any other business. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Solid in the Championship. Huge win, Baz, for your boys on Friday night. Sunderland and Frank Lampard's Coventry, as we're duty-bound to call them, continue their amazing form, Sanny. 3-2 win over Oxford United, up to 5th now. Yeah, they've won, I think it was 7 of the last 8 in the league. They were great, because I last saw them lose the one game in this run against Leeds at home, where they were completely overwhelmed and completely outplayed. And you thought, well, you know, they're doing okay, but the gulf is huge. But then equally, the gulf between Leeds and Sheffield United and the rest is pretty big anyway. But yeah, I mean, we've talked before about like the players they've got, and they still had players to come back. And Ellis Sims, who was doing okay and then hadn't scored for a while, and Haji Wright had a good run and then he was injured. And some of these players are coming back, but just overall they seem to be doing really well. Sakamoto got the winner in this one, and he's been great so far. Just they all seem to have upped the game, and it seems like every game there's a different player who seems to play like a 10 out of 10. And I guess this comes down to Frank Lampard. Can we give him some credit? Because it's a hell of a turnaround, isn't it? Really hell of a turnaround from when he were with Mark Robbins.
Is it like, does he give everyone, remember that he always said that there was that chat in the shower that he got from Jose Mourinho that made him the better player, where Jose said, you can be in the top 3 players in the world, and that made him into Frank Lampard, the Frank Lampard we knew as a footballer. I was chatting to some colleagues about this. Like, when you've been a top player, as we must refer to Frank Lampard, as his uncle did, Harry, when you become a manager, your obvious ambition is to be a top manager. But being a top manager isn't quite the same, because there are fewer managers around. So if you are... Frank Lampard was quite a decent manager of Derby County when they were in the Championship. He's obviously doing a decent job at Coventry. Maybe this is his level, and he might actually be a decent manager at that level. So he could become like a Neil Warnock, or So right. and that actually is a really high standard of being a manager, because if you are like a promotion specialist, that's a good living. That's not too bad. But because he's been Frank Lampard,
yeah,
it's going to be, oh well, Chelsea are looking for a new manager, which I would be very amused to see, by the way. But he might actually be of a standard.
Yeah, and actually it'll be weird. I suppose it depends how he feels about that, given what he achieved.
Yeah, that's it. It's whether he can accept that.
Because I suppose there are, when I was growing up, there were managers who were this good at managing. I don't know. Let's say Steve Coppell, great manager, was never a top manager. Was a great player, right?
It was a brilliant footballer. Brilliant
footballer. But obviously, I never saw that because he wasn't that. So to me, Steve Coppell was basically the Crystal Palace manager. But if you're 10 now, you're just getting into football. What's Frank Lampard? He's your good Championship manager. That's what he is. And
you'd have someone like Colin Todd, who's like the best defender.
Yeah.
Of his
Roy
era,
McFarlane,
or
yeah.
I mean, like Joe Royle was a fantastic player for Everton. But you just think of Joe Royle, like big Joe Royle. But it's a slightly different thing, and they become, so maybe Frank's reinventing that manager thing.
Yeah, interesting. You're shooing for the playoffs now, Baz, aren't you? 65 points. That is 13 points ahead of Blackburn in 7th.
You'd think so, yeah. And automatic promotion looks a bit beyond them. So
Re-sign Mickey Gray. That's the key.
Part of me wants them to get promoted. Part of me thinks it could be a terrible idea, but I suppose you have to be in it to win it, as someone said to me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, true. I mean, I suppose for the pod, if Sunderland went on we're sort of like Southampton, I think that might be quite good for us for next season. Just sort of you in crisis every week.
What Sunderland going up would be is a different one to the ones we've seen. We've got the ones who've spent a load of money. We've got the ones who've spent no money. With Luton's expendables. But what about a bunch of kids? What happens if you actually throw in players? Some of them are still children. How will they do in the Premier League?
Absolutely destroy them.
Birmingham beat Wickham, first beating second in League One. So now 12 points between them. Birmingham played a game less as well, so they're pretty much shoo-ins to go up. Charlton, having not scored a corner in what feels like 9 years, says producer Joel, Charlton fan, scored 2 in injury time to beat fellow playoff contenders Leyton Orient. And the Neil Harris bounce continues, a 2-0 win away at Crawley. 2 clean sheets in a row. I was just listening to the Under the Abbey Stand pod, the Cambridge United pod. Neil Harris is responsible for 28% of our wins this season, having managed 2 games. It doesn't say a whole lot about what Gary Monk's achievements. Yes, John?
Have you been under the Abbey Stand?
Have I been under it? I have, yeah.
On one of my 2 trips there, they had we went into a small gym that they doubled as a press room, and I remember it, there was just sort of wall bars, and it was like being at school.
Yeah, it's not like it's obviously the greatest football stadium ever built, John.
I do like it, actually. I should say no. I've enjoyed it on both my visits. I will say that.
But yeah, it's it's small corridors, and the function room is nice. I like it. It's the changing rooms. I think when we drew with Man United and got the replay, they think they put more than they added an extra urinal for the players. There wasn't just one for each team. Walsall might throw it away in League Two. Their lead at the top, just 4 points now, Sanny.
Yeah, I think they will throw away League Two, actually. Jamil Matt is the main striker now, who I know, actually. And fair play to him. They're just
massive name drop. It's a huge name drop.
Fair play to him. They just lump the ball up to him. I had the high stakes. By the way, going back, I was thinking about this when you mentioned Frank Lampard. And to give you a comparison, I'll get back to Walsall, this relates. But I was wondering, in my jobbing world as a reporter, do I prefer the lower stakes element than the higher one? So I was doing Walsall Gillingham updates the other day into Man City Real Madrid. And I was very aware that I could absolutely ruin the entire evening if I were to go too long with an update. And as it happened, John Murray threw to us, and I had about 5 seconds left before Real Madrid scored. But I was thinking, is it easier doing the lower league stuff where there's less scrutiny? Do I enjoy that more?
I don't think it is easier. I think it's interesting that a lot of people starting their way in League Two and League One, because you just don't know the players. You just don't know the shapes of the game. It's easier to do a Champions League game, right, than it is to do a League Two game, because there's much more randomness in League Two.
The same goes for match reporting as well. Yeah. It's if you're given a 10th v 11th, it's even in the Premier League, it's harder to find a theme than it would be from City v United or whatever. It's a not that it's a battle between top teams these days. There you go.
Well, there you go. I'm going about things the right way then. Well,
yes, you are.
In that game, poor Jamil Matt on a pitch that's basically mud, just getting the ball lumped up to him constantly. They've lost the man who was pushing 20 goals, and he's trying to get him across. Whereas Bradford City are on a roll. They've only lost 1 at home all season. They're doing really well. And I was at on the weekend on Saturday, Doncaster Rovers, who absolutely tore apart Newport County. They were excellent. Luke Molyneux's superb, and Rob Street they've got on loan from Lincoln, who's absolute tower, doing brilliant stuff. So the teams below Walsall actually have loads of momentum. So it's one to wait and see there.
Mark says, a wee Edinburgh derby fit bar corner. Hibs bottom just before Christmas, 15 unbeaten. Winning goal, a great hit from a centre-half. Sunshine on Leith. What more can you want? I still love Sunshine on Leith. You know, when it's banged out, when the Hibs fans are all doing it, it's something else, isn't it? The winner is an absolute beauty by Jack Iredale, an Australian who did play centre-back and left-back for Cambridge in our promotion year of whenever COVID was. Actually, on the subject of whenever COVID was, I said that Liverpool won the league we were trying to work out the last time a team had run away with the league, and it was Liverpool in what I called it the COVID season. It was the season where they were already top by a long way when COVID hit, and a few Liverpool fans got really annoyed with me for what I thought was just stating a fact that had actually been told to me by a Liverpool fan. And I was like, why is this a problem? Because apparently a lot of other fans sort of look down on Liverpool's achievement of winning the league when there weren't fans in the stadium for the last couple of months for some reason.
Null and void.
There you go. Null and void.
That was it. Null and void.
So anyway, I walked into that and upset some people going, please write the record. There were fans in the stadium for most of this. Fine. It was winning the league is a great achievement. I am pleased for everybody. Kilogram says, but anyway, well done, Jack Ardell. It's a lovely goal. Go and check it out. With the news that Yannick Vestergaard has been bringing his dog to training, does anyone know if Jan Bednarek has any pets? Here is Yannick Vestergaard with his love. Well, I think it's one of. I think it's Vestergaard. It might be Jan Bednarek. No, which one is that one? I've done it. That's Jan Bednarek. I'm staring at a photo. I put it in the WhatsApp group. He's got a lovely dog called Candy. So has Yannick Vestergaard. So Yannick Vestergaard has also been bringing his dog to training. I didn't know this, but there you go. Like, it's easy to.
Well, I tell you what, I saw Yannick Vestergaard play for Leicester at West Ham on Thursday, and they may as well have played his dog instead.
That is brutal.
All right, well, that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sanny.
Pleasure.
Cheers, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens. We'll be back on Wednesday.
This is The Guardian.